Why do smart people make stupid decisions under pressure? You have the data, you have the strategy, you know what you should be doing, but in those critical moments, when a client pushes back, when the deal starts slipping, or when stress crosses a certain threshold, something else takes over. You freeze, you over-accommodate, or even worse, you blow it all up. But let me reassure you, this is not happening because you're weak or you lack willpower. It's simply that in those high-stakes moments, you're not the one driving. These four little characters are. And who the heck are they, you might be asking? Well, think of them as your silent board of directors, living in your nervous system, controlling roughly 95% of your decisions without your permission. They decide how much money you're allowed to ask for. They decide whether you're allowed to feel safe when things are finally going well. And they are the reason you keep hitting the same invisible ceiling, no matter how hard you work, no matter how much you've already achieved. Most leaders go their entire careers without knowing these characters even exist. They assume that the voice in their head is just themselves, and that is a fatal error, because if you don't know them by their names, they will own you. If you don't learn the nature of these four archetypes that I'm about to share in this video, these four will continue running wild in the background of your mind. But if you master how to spot them in real time, understanding the key fundamentals that I'm sharing in this video, you will gain a level of control of your mind that 99% of your competitors don't even know it's even possible. Because once you know how your subconscious mind works in difficult situations, you become a master of perception and a master of stillness in the chaos of everyday life. But before we go any further, if you're new here, I'm Ale Grandpa. I'm a serial entrepreneur on a mission to merge science and ancient wisdom. And this is whole grain wisdom, the space where we reconnect the dots between neuroscience and spirituality, between physics and mysticism, so we can prepare for the greatest revolution in human history, the consciousness revolution. By the end of this video, you'll discover exactly where these four archetypes come from and the science of how they hijack your nervous system, and most importantly, how to catch them in the act so that they serve you instead of sabotaging you. And to fully understand how these patterns got hardwired into you, we can't just look at a brain scan. We need to go back to the beginning, around 3,000 years ago. We are in ancient Greece at the theater of Dionysus, carved into the southern slope of the Acropolis. 15,000 people sit in a curved stone rows, watching figures move across the stage. But these aren't actors as we really know them today. They don't show their faces. They are wearing masks. The Greeks call them prosopa, the origin of our word persona. They are our modern version of an avatar, let's say. And here, what the ancients understood that we somehow forgotten. Our human personality isn't just confined into oneself. It's composed of many ones, many characters, many masks, each playing a different role. And every day, depending on the situation that we are in, we shift between these avatars. The loving father becomes the ruthless warrior. The wise king becomes the jealous tyrant. Same man, different pattern running the show. But for the Greeks, this wasn't just entertainment. This was psychological technology. During the play, they were reverse engineering the human psyche, mapping its operating system in the only language that they had, through stories. And those masks didn't remain on the stage only. They followed us into myth, into religions, into the stories that we tell ourselves about who we are and who we are allowed to become. Fast forward 2000 years. We are now in 1913 in Switzerland. A 30-year-old psychiatrist named Carl Jung is losing his mind, or at least that's what his colleagues think. Jung has broken from Freud, his mentor, his father figure in the field. The stress that he was living at the time has triggered something inside of him. Strange visions, waking dreams, voices that speak in symbols that he doesn't really understand. For 3 years, Jung descends in what he later called his confrontation with the unconscious. He fills journals with drawings, draws strange figures, he depicts recurring characters that seem to have lives of their own. Most doctors would have medicated themselves, checked into a facility, but Jung did something else. He listened. And what he found in that breakdown helps explain why 100 years later you freeze in important meetings, you sabotage deals, or agree to terms that you actually hate. The figures in Jung's vision weren't random. They weren't symptoms of going crazy. They were patterns, psychological structures that extended not just in his mind, but in the minds of every patient he'd ever treated, in the mythology of every culture that he'd ever studied. Jung realized he wasn't having a breakdown, he was actually having a breakthrough. He was seeing the architecture of the human psyche itself. He called this hidden layer the collective unconscious, a kind of psychological inheritance that every human being is born with. Not memory exactly, but templates, blueprints for survival that evolved over hundreds of thousands of years. And the characters that lived in this layer, well, he called them archetypes. Now, Jung mapped dozens of archetypes: the hero, the shadow, the anima, the wise old man, but there were 4 that he kept coming back to. 4 that seemed different from all the others, more primal, let's say, more universal. 4 patterns that didn't just influence behavior, they controlled it, especially under stress. Jung sensed their importance, but never fully systematized them. That work would come later. In the 1990s, a medical intuitive named Caroline Myss spent years working with patients whose physical illnesses seemed mysteriously connected to some psychological patterns. She noticed something really strange. Certain archetypal patterns showed up in everyone, not as personality traits, but as hardwired survival operating systems that activated automatically when basic needs were threatened. Think of food, shelter, safety, belonging. Remember the basic pyramid of needs that we all learned at school? Well, threaten any of these basic needs, and one of these 4 patterns takes completely control of the human psyche. Every time, in every person, and across every culture. Myss called them the 4 survival archetypes: the child, the victim, the saboteur, and the prostitute. Now, those names might trigger you, especially the prostitute, I can imagine, but stay with me. These aren't insults. They are not diagnoses. They are collective survival mechanisms that evolve to keep you and me and every human being alive. The question isn't whether you have them or not, because everybody does. The problem is that most people have no idea when these patterns take control. And for entrepreneurs, for leaders, and for anyone making high-stakes decisions under pressure, that blindness is devastating. And here is where ancient wisdom meets modern neuroscience. And honestly, this is where it gets even more interesting. Your brain processes roughly 11 million bits of information per second. Sounds impressive, right? But your subconscious mind, the part of you that you think as you, handles only about 40 bits per second. 40 out of 11 million. Less than 0.05%. That means that everything else, every other processing power involved in what you think, feel, decide, and do is actually happening in systems that you cannot see, that you cannot access, and most importantly, that nobody taught you how to control. Your conscious mind isn't the pilot, as you might think. It's actually just the press secretary, crafting narratives to explain decisions that were already made somewhere else. So, where do these survival archetypes actually live? Let me take you into modern day science right now. Precisely, let me introduce you to the neuroscientist Stephen Porges, who spent decades studying the vagus nerve, the largest nerve transferring information all the way from the back of your brain down into the sacral region, crossing all of your body. His polyvagal theory revealed something crucial. Your nervous system is constantly scanning for threat. Not just physical danger, but social danger as well. The kind of threat that for our ancestors literally meant exile from the tribe, death by isolation. When your nervous system detects threat, the real or the perceived ones, it doesn't ask for your permission. It automatically activates survival patterns that were encoded before you even learned how to speak any word. Your throat tightens before meeting? Well, that's not nerves. That's a survival archetype recognizing a threat of belonging and taking control of your psychology. You procrastinate on a decision that could change everything for your business? That's not laziness. That's a pattern protecting you from the unknown. But here's what really changes the game. These patterns don't just live in your brain, because research by Dr. Schleip and others have shown that your fascia, the connective tissue surrounding every muscle, every organ and cell in your body, literally changes its structure in response to the emotional experience. Your body is like storing these patterns. Your tissue holds the score of what helped you survive in the past or what scarred you with trauma. That moment in childhood when expressing your real needs led to rejection, well, your fascia adapted. Your nervous system encoded authenticity equals danger. Fast forward 20 years and now you're in a board meeting about to state what your company actually needs, and the same pattern activates. Your throat constricts, your posture shifts, and your voice gets smaller. And one of these four archetypes smoothly takes the wheel. You think you're making a strategic decision, but instead, you're actually running a program installed before your 5th birthday. So, you now understood the origin and reasons to exist for these archetypes. Let me finally show you exactly how these four patterns hijack founders and leaders. Because once you see how they work, there is no way back. Let's start from the first one, the child archetype. This archetype holds every adaptation you made to survive your family of origin. Before you could reason, before you could even protect yourself, you actually learned what you needed to do to receive love. Maybe you learned that love was conditional on achievement. Maybe you learned that being quiet kept you from being targeted. These lessons never disappeared. They simply went underground. In business, the wounded child shows up as seeking approval through achievement, obsessive metric checking, not actually for real data, but just for reassurance. If a single critical email from an investor can destroy your entire week, if your self-worth spikes and crashes with your revenue, the wounded child is running your company. And here's the brutal truth. No amount of traction will ever heal that wound, because it's not a business problem. It's a childhood pattern looking for resolution in the wrong domain. Now, let's bring in the victim archetype. This archetype monitors one single question. Do external circumstances control my fate? And if you still believe that they do, well, that's your archetype pumping victimization at full power. But let's be clear, the victim isn't a delusion, it's a detection system. The problem is when these patterns run on autopilot. In founders, the dark side of the victim sounds something like this. if only the investors understood, or the market timing was wrong, or my co-founder isn't pulling their weight. This victim archetype creates a perfect trap. As long as circumstances are to blame, you never have to confront your own agency. But here, on the opposite, what the empowered victim knows, recognizing when you're actually being victimized becomes a survival skill. The work isn't eliminating the pattern, it's developing discernment. The third one is the saboteur, the most counterintuitive archetype. It's the one creating obstacles to your own success. Why would anyone even do that? Well, because your nervous system doesn't optimize for success. It optimizes for familiarity, for safety, and for known circumstances. And if struggle, chaos, and near failure are what you know, if that's the water that you learn how to swim, well, your system will unconsciously recreate those conditions over and over and over. Because this is the single most damaging pattern to personal growth. It's the ultimate blocker to change. So watch for this. Are you overcomplicating solutions that could be just simple? Creating drama where there doesn't need to be any? Resisting ease like it's suspicious? That's the saboteur whispering. If it comes easy, it doesn't count. If it's not hard, you don't deserve it. Now, take a deep breath, because this last one is the archetype that almost nobody wants to admit they have. The prostitute archetype is the most uncomfortable to face and the most important. This pattern activates when you sell your integrity for survival. Not sex necessarily, but integrity, vision, authenticity, the things that make you the real you. Every time that you pivot away from your real vision because investors want something safer, every time that you change your message to please an audience instead of speaking your truth, that's the prostitute running a calculation. What am I willing to sell to feel safe? But here's the positive side. The empowered prostitute becomes the guardian of your integrity. Once you recognize when you're about to negotiate away something non-negotiable, then the question stops being, what can I get? And becomes, what am I willing to trade? And is it worth it? So, as we get to the end of the video, let me tell you what nobody wants to admit. This is what most people want to ignore or bypass. You don't get rid of these archetypes. They are hardwired into our collective subconscious. It's not something that you can really change of yourself. The idea that you will overcome them through willpower is like thinking that you can force yourself to stop having a heartbeat. What you can do instead, what you can develop, is the key to inner transformation, and it is recognition. Recognition requires attention. And attention requires you to pause. That fraction of a second between stimulus and response, where you catch the pattern activating and consciously choose a different response, it's the key to rewire these automated patterns. But trust me, you will never be able to notice this while you're running at full speed. It's like trying to focus on the bird's nest on the trees when you're looking out of a car window running on the highway. Next time that you're about to check your metrics for the 15th time of the day, pause and ask, is this strategic? Or is this my wounded child needing reassurance? Next time that you're about to accept terms that will compromise your vision, pause and ask, is this necessary? Or is it my prostitute trading something sacred for the illusion of safety? And remember, archetypes aren't inherently good or bad. They are neutral energies, and each has a shadow expression and a light expression. And shadow runs you, but light serves you. So the difference is really all about consciousness and recognition. So do something as you watch the end of this video. Stop asking whether this pattern really exists in you, because they do. The real question that you need to ask is which one of these patterns has been driving your mind while you thought that you were in control. 3,000 years ago, the Greeks understood something that we are only now rediscovering. We are not one self, but we are an ecosystem of patterns. Jung mapped this territory, Caroline Myss systematized the survival archetypes, and now modern science is proving what the wisdom traditions always knew. We are remembering, and part of this process is to understand that science and spirituality aren't enemies. They are the same truth, just expressed in different languages. And if you want to go even deeper, if you want to identify exactly which patterns are running your decisions and learn to redirect them at the level where they actually serve you, that's the essence of what we do at Whole Grain Wisdom. We are building the community for the next generation of entrepreneurs, the quantum founders, the leaders driven by inner truth instead of trauma and external validation. And if you think that this video was great and you can now continue your own life without doing the real work, please think it twice, because understanding this intellectually is one thing, but rewiring it in your nervous system, in your fascia, in the 95% of the system that runs below your conscious awareness, that is a real ultramarathon. And that's where everything changes. So like and subscribe and join the consciousness revolution.